Hello and welcome to a standard deck profile for Lyrical Cup. Today I'm going to be talking about Kairi, my choice for any Lyrical Cup events I might attend over the season. Get some business out of the way. I was gone for a long time. I had to travel for a family vacation, but then also had to attend a funeral right after that vacation, so I've been quite busy. But now I'm back, ready to make videos again. The deck I'm making a video about today is Kairi, as I mentioned. Kairi, I think, brings a lot to the table. You can bounce all your units to protect them from retire effects. You can recur your aggression very consistently because you don't really use a lot of resources to do it. And you can play through damage denial pretty much perfectly. And the deck can potentially generate a lot of cards for a short period of time, and then it runs out of counterblast. But all these things make it pretty flexible. You can try to rush down early with your grade 2s and then bounce them back to your hand to deny the opponent the opportunity to damage deny you by hitting your rears. And even if they do that, you're probably still fine. You can also play like a value-oriented grind game using your triple drive Vanguard and your medium-sized numbers as well as your card draw to run the opponent out of cards over a period of time. It's better than just playing Artisaria mirrors all day. Let's be honest, that mirror match is probably not very fun, especially if you have to do it for 6 rounds. So, without any further ado, let's get into the actual main deck and the ride deck. We're starting with any starter, but I like this art on this one. Then we're playing Mermaid Idol Sedna. This has the effect that when it's rode upon by Top Idol Aqua, you Soul Blast 1, look at the top 7 cards of the deck, and you choose a grade 2 or greater unit from among them and reveal it and put it in hand. So this is really good. It helps you find those grade 2s for that grade 2 rush game to force the opponent up to an uncomfortable amount of damage. It can also find you like important cards for later, like copies of your grade 4 Vanguard. Then we have Top Idol Aqua, which does something similar. And when it's rode over by a grade 3 Mermaid, conveniently Kairi is a mermaid, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose a grade 2 or greater unit, and add it to hand, and then shuffle. So it's a slightly weaker version of the grade 1, but it's free, which is a big distinction. And then we have Aesthesis Kairi. I never know how you're actually supposed to pronounce that. Aesthesis, who knows. When this unit attacks, you Soul Blast 1 and choose up to 2 of your rear guards and return them to your hand. At the end of the battle it attacked, if you Persona Road, choose up to 2 cards from hand and call them to R in different rows. Now, we can't Persona Ride in this deck, so this effect literally doesn't matter here. Just look at the first one. This can still give us a 4-attack turn when we have a specific card in the front row, but overall, this Vanguard's really weak. It's extremely underwhelming. It wasn't even good when it came out until it got grade 4 support, in my opinion. So this is really an outdated card. Thankfully, we're getting a new grade 3 Kairi in the future, and if you continue to play grade 4 Kairi, that one is still the best one to put in your ride deck. And if you don't want to play grade 4 Kairi, the new one is a probably pretty competitive deck just playing 4 copies of the new grade 3. So we would literally get rid of this card immediately if we had any other card to play in its spot, but we don't for now. So we have to keep it. This just means your grade 3 turn is going to be very low pressure. You're basically taking advantage of the fact that your opponent's on grade 2 and you're on 3 to apply pressure. You're not getting very much pressure on its own from this card's effect. So keep that in mind. That does somewhat make a compelling argument to play going second on purpose, but I personally still think going first is better because you get a twin drive turn before your opponent's first grade 3 turn, which means you're more likely to take low amounts of damage on that grade 3 turn. You also get to grade 2 rush them down while they're on grade 1, which lets you hit better numbers, and other reasons and such that make this slightly better. Now, the advantage of going second is you get to ride straight to grade 4 and get to do your full power game plan on turn 3. So keep that in mind. Now let's get into the main deck. We have 2 copies of the grade 4 Kairi, Aesthesis X Live Kairi. This card has the effect that all your rear guards placed this turn get 5k. That's a continuous effect, so it doesn't need to see them get placed, I believe. And then Auto V, when this unit attacks, if your soul has a card with Kairi, so that means do not ever Soul Blast this card unless you have another copy to re-ride into. choose 2 of your rear guards, return them to hand, up to 2 of your rear guards, sorry, and then choose 2 cards from your hand and call them to R. You have to choose 2 to call, but you can choose 1 to bounce, which is nice, in case you have a really small board at the time. So this card has triple drive, which is really nice, but it doesn't have any effect that increases its own power. So you're really just relying on that triple drive pressure, but at 13k, it's really easy for the opponent to 2 or 3 to pass this card. So generally your Vanguard is not really threatening, but it will generate you card advantage and also will let you stack triggers on your rears to offer very threatening rearguard attacks. This also does give you an easy 5 attacks. Bounce the front row, call a new front row. And with one of our cards later, we can actually get 5 boosted attacks, which means, or 4 boosted attacks, unless you boost the Vanguard, which you will do sometimes, in order to really put the pressure on the opponent for hand size. Will drain a lot of shield out of their hands. We can often demand 2 or 3 cards from hand to guard any of our attacks. But because this card is pretty low power on its own, it is very tempting for the opponent to try to 2 or 3 to pass it. So if you do ever hit the triggers, you will just completely destroy them because they're almost certainly going to go for the 2 to pass or 3 to pass because this is the weakest attack of our turn. Even with one of our other cards, it'll only be 18k unless we boost it, which means that it's going to be pretty obvious a good target to 2 to pass. Whereas if they perfect guard this, they might not have a perfect guard to survive one of our other rear guards with crit. So it's a pretty steep gamble for them to not go for that against us. Next we have our grade 3s, starting with 2 copies of Colored Bop Dragon Walbregia. This card has the effect that when it's placed on R or put on G, choose a grade 4 card from your hand and reveal it. And if you reveal the card, or if your Vanguard is grade 4, you perform one of the following, depending on which circle this unit's on. If it's on R, you counterblast 1, draw a card, and get 10k. And if it's on G, you get 15k shield. And when this card is discarded from hand, for the cost of riding a grade 3 from the ride deck, or paying the cost of stride, which we can't do, you draw a card. So this is overall a pretty decent card in general. It's shield value, especially if we have a Kairi in our hand, which we can reveal to get shield value in the early game even. It's card draw. It hits a decent number on its own, 23, and with a grade 4 Kairi in play, it's hitting 28, which is a magic number. Overall, just pretty solid. If we don't have grade 4s in hand, this card has no shield value in the early game, and we generally won't have a grade 4 in hand because we only play 2 copies. We're going to hard search our grade 4 Vanguard. So that means usually this card will be useless until we get to Superior Ride or until we naturally ride grade 4. So keep in mind that you probably don't want this in your opener. It can, however, be used to get a ride cycler effect when we ride up to grade 3 Kairi. So sometimes keeping it when you already know like what you're going to discard for ride every turn can be useful. It's a decent card overall. It's one of our best uses for Counterblast because it gets to draw a card and apply pressure, whereas our other options just kind of generate value. Next, we have 1 copy of Moon Nestling Fantasia Adelheid. This is part of a cycle that every nation got. It's the same cycle as Sages, I think. So it gets 10k power or 10k shield, depending on if their drive check or damage check revealed a trigger that turn. And then at the end of the battle, it has 2 effects. You Soul Blast 1 and perform all of the following. You choose a rear guard in the same column as this unit and bounce it. And you can remove an over trigger from drop and call a unit with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard from hand. It's a nice little bonus, but generally speaking, we're not going to use this that much. So this is easily the weakest card in the deck. You could easily cut this for anything else if you wanted. Next, we have our grade 2s, starting with 3 copies of Dazzle Bubble Paradise Pressia. Why not 4? Because I'm broke, that's why. When this card's put on G from hand or discarded for the cost of riding from the ride deck, you counterblast 1 or energy blast 3 and you draw a card, and we literally can't use the second effect because we never Persona ride. This is our really only way to spend energy, and it's a value-generating way to spend energy, which is nice. Getting incidental shield value to block small attacks or to block the last 5k of a medium or big attack, while then potentially drawing cards that help us guard the other attacks is really nice. Next, we get into the important grade 2s, starting with our most important grade 2, Soaring Bubble Penelope. So this card has the effect that if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard Kairi, it gets 5k, and then auto once per turn when your other front or rear guard is returned to hand by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Kairi Vanguard. You Soul Blast 1 and stand all of your rear guards in the same column as this unit. And if your Vanguard is grade 4 or greater, all of your front row units get 5k. So this helps us, this essentially gives 15k to the board, which is pretty good. It lets us restand a column, so we can, instead of calling just 2 front row units, we can call a front row and a back row in the other column and get a bunch of boosted attacks that turn, which means we're hitting pretty solid numbers. This card also is the best candidate to put in front of a high quality booster because it'll allow us to use that booster twice in one turn. So overall, it's pretty solid. You kind of need to hit this to hit your highest power ceiling turns. So this becomes the most important grade 2 in the deck, but you only really need 1 copy because we're just going to keep bouncing this back to hand to protect it. Next, we have 3 copies of A Little Demonic Method Valifer. This is a nice little utility card for the deck. When it's placed on R, you may Soul Charge 1 and then Counterblast 1 and draw a card. That's a cost, so it's optional, but this Soul Charge 1 is mandatory, I believe. And then when it attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, if you have a card in your soul with the same name as your Vanguard, this unit gets 5k until the end of that battle. So if we rewrite the grade 4, we can get a nice little 5k, but that's not really essential, so we're not trying to seek that play out. If it happens, it happens. Overall, pretty good. It builds resources, and because we bounce and recall units to get our multi-attack, if we play this in the main phase, we get a soul charge, and then we can bounce and recall, and we get another soul charge, and generally we use about 2 soul a turn, once on this card, and then soul on Yuika. So that means that we are going to produce exactly as much soul as we need for every single turn. We'll never run out, in theory. Next, we have another really good grade 2. This is Carefree After Class Huolette. This card has, when it's placed on R, if you have a grade 3 or greater Kairi Vanguard, until end of turn, this unit gets a boost and +5. Keep in mind that it only gets it for that turn, so if you leave this in play, it will no longer be able to boost. And then at the end of your turn, you can counterblast 1 and put this into Soul, draw a card, and choose one of your Vanguards with Kairi unit's name. For every 2 grades of that unit, you get to bounce a unit, or bounce a rear guard and return it to hand. So this is the other best use of Counterblast because it draws a card, builds a soul, and also returns our units to hand. If we're on grade 4 Kairi, we bounce 2 things, and if we used a Yuika or a Francette to bounce another thing, we should be able to clear our entire board with this effect. That means that we can present a completely empty board to an opponent that might want to retire stuff to trigger effects or anything like that. Overall, really good card. You do want to draw multiples of these a game because they keep going into soul, so you lose them every time you activate one. Next, we have our last grade 2, Lovely Pink Francette, or Loving Pink Francette, sorry. This has a useless effect for the first effect because we're not on Curse Rain. But the second effect is when it attacks, if we have 3 or more units with different card names, this unit gets 5k until end of turn. And if you have 4 more units with different card names, at the end of that battle, you choose up to one of your other rear guards and bounce it to hand. So it's one of the harder hitting attackers in the deck. With Kairi in play, it'll be a 20k base on its own for the grade 4 Kairi, which means that if you boost it with a Yuika, it'll be 38, which is a pretty good number. That hits over front trigger plus 5k. Forces the opponent to use 2 15s to guard it, or a 20 and a 10. That's going to just demand more shield value of the opponent's hand. Same with Penelope. Those both demand a lot of shield value from the opponent, especially when boosted. And the self-bounce means that this plus Huolette can clear our entire board. It's a nice thing to have. Just make sure with this one that you sequence it correctly so that you have enough units with different names when this unit attacks, so that you can still bounce things. You need 4 different names, and that's not as hard to get in this deck as it sounds. If we have a Yuika, a Penelope, a Valifer, and this card or something, or a Huolette, Penelope, this card, and a Yuika, it's like another common board state. This will give us easily all the names we need. The other list was bad because it had 2 grade 2 attackers, which we would never have. Next, we have our grade 1s, starting with the most important one. This is To the Stars of Horizon, Rising in the Night Sky, Yasmin. It's a mouthful of a name. It has an axe skill on R. If you have a Vanguard with Kairi in its name, and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can counterblast 1 to search the deck, soul, or drop for a grade 4 unit with Kairi in its name and ride it standing, and then put this unit into deck and shuffle it. That's a really good effect. It means going second, we get to ride straight to 4 and start executing our game plan without a turn in between to have to just stall or build value. that means this hits pretty solid acceleration. That's going to mean that going second, we have a lot more of a chance to stay in the game, even if the opponent had a good grade 3 turn. And then it has the effect that if you have a grade 4 Vanguard with Kairi in its name, it gets 10k shield. So it's a 15k shield guard, which means that even redundant copies are still useful to us, which is nice. It means that the average shield value of this deck, with the Butterfly Dragon, with Adelheid, and with this card, is significantly higher than most decks. Most decks just have their triggers as their high shield cards, and everything else is base shield value. But this deck has 3 different cards that increase their shield value, and 3 of them are grade 3s, which normally don't have any shield value. So that makes us surprisingly durable. Next, we have our other grade 1. This is Cooling Heart Yuika. This has been a staple of Lyrical Monasterio for a long time now. What this card does is when your other unit in the same column as this unit is placed, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it gets 5k until end of turn, making it a 13k booster in most scenarios. And then it has the effect, at the end of the battle, this unit boosted a rear guard, Soul Blast 1, and choose one of your other boosted rear guards, or choose the boosted rear guard and return it to your hand. So it bounces something, allowing you to get extra value out of whatever on-place effect you bounced with this effect to play it again the next turn. It clears your front row so that your opponent can't attack into your units. So that's really good for early rush, because in the early rush you can rush down with grade 2s, and sometimes your opponent will try to punish that by attacking into your rear guards and leaving you with no CB. So instead, we will bounce those units. They have to attack our Vanguard and give us the CB that we want. Or they can forego getting their drive check for that turn, which might mean death for them. So overall, this is a really good card. It is well worth the price tag. It's been a staple in Lyrical for a long time, and from all appearances, it looks like it'll continue to be a staple because they keep reprinting this card rather than printing something better than it. So it feels like they really want this card to be part of the standard format for a long time. So it's not really a bad idea to pick these up. Every time they get reprinted, they go down to like 20 bucks and they go back up to 40 at some point. So when they get reprinted, just get some. Otherwise, just bite the bullet and get them now, because you'll get use out of them if you play Lyrical a lot. Trust me. Then we have our PGs, just 3 normal unit PGs, pretty typical for standard, and then 1 Elementaria Sanctitude. You'll notice we're using the new Elementaria, which has the effect that it's a free perfect guard if the opponent has a crest other than the energy generator. So it particularly for stride decks, but also it hits some incidental decks like some collab decks like Mushi King and some other things. So this is overall a moderately useful perfect guard, but because it's a blitz order, it gets around a lot of guard restricts that mention call cards to G. So the other perfect guards would run into some restrictions, but this one will escape those restrictions, so it's still worth playing, even though in most of your games it's probably just going to be a regular perfect guard. Next up, we have our last order. This is Protection Twincast. You don't need to play this Regala's piece specifically. You can play Radiant's Caliburn for the draw 2 and or the counter charge. Well, it's draw 2 or counter charge and put in a soul. So, but both of those are reasons to consider including that card. You don't really want Forbidal. We now have a hard search Superior Ride for our grade 4. So Forbidal isn't doing as much for us as it sounds like it would. And we don't need Persona Ride, so we don't need the Persona Ride Cup. Really, I think the best use for this slot is something defensive, because we have a decent amount of defense in the deck, and just getting one more card that can keep us alive potentially makes us very tanky. And grade 4 Kairi usually doesn't kill on the first turn it comes down, and it often doesn't kill on the second turn it's been in play either. Often games will go to the third grade 4 turn, and that means that survivability can be more important than the other reasons that you would play a Regala's piece. So I like this one a lot. It also can be discarded for cost and still get you some value because you can play it from the drop. This has choose one of your units being attacked and gets 10k until end of the battle. And then it has continuous in the drop zone that you can, if your unit's attacked, you can remove this card and choose one of your units being attacked, and it gets 5k until end of battle for each grade of that unit. So with a grade 4 Vanguard, we're getting plus 20k, which is pretty solid. Next, we have our triggers, starting with 4 vanilla heals. Just play whatever heal has the best artwork that you like. Then we have 4 effect crits. This is Precious Tune Edwiga. Probably Edwiga, if I had to guess, if it sounds German. Could be wrong. These go into soul when you boost them and then give something 2k. And we're primarily here for the soul, not the 2k, because this deck does demand a lot of soul. So if you're not drawing Valifer, you might need to boost with a crit in order to maintain your soul output. Next, we have 4 vanilla crits. 8 crits is always really good, especially in decks that are just pure aggro, like this one. This deck doesn't have any kind of control or other elements. This deck is just all about attacking multiple times over and over again until the opponent dies. This also, again, 8 crits punishes the opponent for 2 to passing your grade 4 Kairi, because, again, it's very small. If they do that and you hit double crit, they just die. Whereas if you played draws or more fronts in that spot, then potentially you would hit 2 triggers but still only deal 1 damage. And then to round out the triggers, we have 3 fronts. Snow Skip Palvi, the effect front that gives additional shield. You could play the soul fronts if you want. Those would also benefit the deck because they would help you pay costs. But generally, if you play the deck correctly, you should have enough soul every single turn. So instead, I'd like the extra shield value in this. It'll help you survive early rush because it'll be a 15k instead of 10k like a draw would, or 5k like a draw would. And then whenever we do our multi-attack, we always have a standing front row when the Vanguard swings because it bounces and calls. So that means that we always get the full benefit of the front, 10k to 3 different units. This also makes the decision of when to go for the 2 to pass easier, because if your first check is a front, there's no decision to be made. You just know you hit a front, you got the power to the Vanguard, and then if one of your next 2 checks is a trigger, then you break through without ever having to gamble. And then lastly, we have our overtrigger, Spiritual King of Nights, Bright Sky, Merizandlia. This card is not necessary for the deck. There's other options you could play, but I see a lot of lists running it, so I included it in this video, and I'm still trying it out myself to decide if I want to commit to it. But what Merizandlia does, or Merizandlia, sorry, does is it draws a card for every 2 open circles on the opponent's side, including G. So that means that you're generally drawing like 2 cards if the opponent had a full board last turn, or more cards if they are the kind of deck that bounces or puts their units into soul or bottom of deck or anything like that. And then it retires all rear guards and guardians on the opponent's side. That means that if the opponent ever 2 to passes or 3 to passes or no passes our Vanguard without a perfect guard, this will destroy all the guardians, and now our Vanguard will just hit unless they've hit defensive triggers. And after doing that, we can put the 100 million on a rear guard that hasn't attacked yet, and they suddenly took a damage that they weren't expecting, and then they now have to deal with a 100 million swing, is the theory. Plus, this will draw us more cards to help us survive, and the retire might slow the opponent down by taking away important units. So there's a lot of little benefits to this trigger that make it sound appealing. If you don't like this, though, I would recommend playing, firstly, the Red OT. The Red OT has the effect that it chooses a standing rear guard, and it gives it the ability to self-restand for free once per turn at the end of the battle it attacked. And then if you didn't choose a standing unit, you draw a card, and then you choose a card, draw a card, and choose it to one of your... Sorry, if you did not choose a card, you draw a card, and then call a unit from hand to R. So no matter what, you're getting 1 additional attack that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And if you had a standing unit to give the benefit to, then the 100 million can also go on that unit, and now you're getting 2 swings with 100 million, which it can be a lot of pressure. If you hit a crit too, then suddenly they're staring down 100 million with a crit, swinging twice at them, which can generally force through lethal. So that's a pretty good trigger option to play. This deck is hard capped at 5 attacks, maybe 6 if your overtriggers in the drop with Adelheid, but getting a red overtrigger would push that up to 6 attacks with 100 million swings being involved, and that can be the difference between your opponent barely surviving and your opponent just getting obliterated. Other options, there's the blue OT, Idos Faro. This one picks up a card from your drop and adds it to hand, and then gives one of your units a crit. So it forces through more pressure. If the opponent 2 to pass to your Vanguard, you get to deal a surprise damage they weren't expecting. So if you hit this with other crits, sometimes you can force through lethal. So it has some benefits. It's decently good in a grindy game because you pick up a card from drop, so you might get a perfect card or a really good attacker or something, or just a card with a lot of shield value, and that might be enough for you to survive another turn and grind the opponent out. But my secret favorite pick is the lyrical OT, actually. Any lyrical OT would work. They all have the same effect, but just different arts. Pick the one you like the most. But they have the effect that during this fight, during your turn, all your rear guards get 10k. That is a lot of power, especially considering how we generally attack. On grade 4, we're attacking boosted twice, so we're getting 4 boosted attacks and 1 Vanguard swing. If we call a booster behind the Vanguard, we're getting a probably like 18 to 23k power booster, which is really solid. And if we call columns boosted on the other sides, they're getting plus 20 from just this trigger alone for the rest of the game. So that means we can draw a lot of cards out of the opponent's hand. We can basically force them to commit to like 3 or 4 card guard on everything for the rest of the game. We're just going to drain their resources completely. If you hit this early, like turn 1 going second, the opponent basically can't win anymore unless they get very lucky and crit sack you, because all of your early rush is going to have 20k additional power if you can boost it. And that's very threatening. So in a long grindy game, this trigger wins out over all the other ones. It just empties the opponent's hand while keeping your numbers big. Even if you have a bad board, if you can at least call triggers to boost with, you're getting an additional 10k to those triggers. So they're going to be like 15k boosters. This can completely deplete the opponent's hand, and it can just force them to have to take damage they don't want to, because they need to just hit heals or hit defenses to have a chance at guarding everything. It's brutal, and it's just overall pretty solid. It has fallen out of favor recently with a lot of lyrical players, but I think it's still got potentially a lot of value to be added, and Kairi is not a deck that wins immediately. The first grade 4 turn usually just pushes them up damage. The second grade 4 turn might kill them if they don't have a lot of shield value or if they don't hit any heals or defensives. And then the third grade 4 turn usually finishes them off. So with all that, getting this kind of trigger, which applies its benefit over multiple turns and gives you a pretty significant benefit at that, can easily help this deck more than almost any other over trigger. So that's the deck list. Let's show what a practiced turn might look like on grade 4. Let's assume that we went second for this demonstration, and that we soul blasted to 0 as part of our ride line cost. And then we'll have the optimal attacking hand. We'll have a grade 4 Kairi, of course, because we'll have assumed we used this grade 1 and spent a CB. We'll have a, let's say, a Valifer and a Penelope, and let's say we have a Huolette and a Yuika in play. We don't really need a booster for the Vanguard, but maybe we'll have one. But this will be back in deck, and then I will shuffle to actually try to demonstrate what a turn might look like. And then I'll deal myself 3 damage, because that's a realistic amount of damage for us to have taken by turn 3. Especially if we guarded or healed at any point. So, let's look at our damage. We hit this, we hit a front, so at some point we probably negated a turn, and then we hit a cycler. So, we probably had to dump a bunch of shield value to stay at 3. Sorry about that sneeze. So, let's assign all the powers that we need. We're going to assume we spent 1 CB just for the Superior Ride. And then we're going to give this card 5k because it gets 5k on place. And then it's going to get another 5k from Kairi. Penelope has a static 5k, and then it'll get 5k from Kairi. Valifer has no self-improvement in this situation, but it'll have 5k from Kairi. And then Yuika will get 5k when we call a unit in front of it, and Kairi will give it 5k. So we've got pretty decently sized columns here. So we'll start, of course, with the smallest attack, as you normally would in Vanguard. This is going to be a 15, 25, 33k. This hits over a front trigger, demanding a second card from the opponent, no matter what. Or they can just take it, but we're already off to a good start. Then we swing with Penelope. This is going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, just shy of hitting over 2 15s, which is a little annoying, but it's still going to demand 2 cards out of the opponent's hand to guard. Then we can swing with Kairi. Kairi will Soul Blast 1, or no, sorry, Penelope will Soul Blast 1 when we do this stuff, but we're going to bounce 2 units with Kairi and call 2 units. Valifor will Soul Charge 1, and let's Counterblast 1 to draw a card. And then Penelope will activate. We already Soul Blasted the 1 for that. We will restand, and we'll give 5k to the front row, which means grabbing into the die out for Kairi. So Kairi is now 18. Normally, a base 13k Kairi would demand 1 to 15k shield from the opponent to 2 to pass, and that's really tempting, so they probably would go for it. But at 18k Kairi, a 15k is only a 1 to pass. So they now have to drop another trigger to go up to 43 to our 18 to make it a 2 to pass. Because we would go 18, 28, 38. That's actually still a 3 to pass, actually, after I've done the math now. So they're probably going to get 2 cards out of their hand, which is the important part. We're not necessarily trying to kill them. We're trying to deplete their hand size, because they're almost certainly going to survive this turn no matter what. So then we would do triple drive. Oh, we hit a crit. We'll put a trigger over here, I suppose. Then we'll hit another crit. Because we assumed we didn't try to break the 2 to pass, let's put another 10k in a crit over here. And then that's absurdly lucky. I'm going to pretend that this crit didn't happen. And get a perfect card. Still pretty lucky overall. So now we have 2 units that have increased their power by 10k, which means our numbers are going to be a lot better right now. So let's start over here. This is going to be 30, 40, 48 with a crit. Pretty threatening. 2 15ks doesn't guard that. 2 15s and a 5k doesn't guard that. They're going to need 40 shield to guard that. So like 2 fronts to get up to 53. That's going to take a lot of shield value out of their hand. And then we have over here an even bigger swing. We have 25, 35, 45, 55. 2 fronts does not guard that. 2 fronts and 5k guards that, though. So now we're in the realm of taking 3 cards out of the opponent's hand for every guard, and possibly in the realm of incentivizing them to just drop perfect guards at this point. Then we forgot to do something here. At the end of this battle, we would Soul Blast 1 and bounce this for Yuika's effect to our hand. And then at the end of turn, we would activate Hewlett, and this would go to Soul. We would draw a card, and then we would bounce 2 units. So at the end of it all, starting with 0 cards, we ended up with 8, which is pretty solid. If we assume we have like another 3 or 4 cards, let's say 4 cards in our hand already at the start of this turn, we could have something like 4, 8, 12 cards in hand, which looks significantly more defensive than it would be. If we look at this hand, we'll know that some of the cards are just the cards we played that turn. But we got a perfect card, and we hit 2 triggers, and we drew a trigger at some point, and we drew another perfect card at some point. So we've actually got a decent amount of defensive power just off of randomly drawing and other things. And we also got some optional attackers. We didn't get another Hewlett, but we did get another Yuika, so we can still do most of a full board bounce. We'll leave Yuikas in the back row, of course. We also have this energy cycler to try to draw a card while guarding. And we can just take 2 more damage too. Okay, if we assume this over trigger didn't hit, we can take 2. We could drop like a perfect guard, discarding a grade 4, and then we have like these 15k shields to guard with to try to stay low. Saving a perfect guard for next turn and saving enough grade 2s to set up our attack plan this turn. So we would go to the next turn at 5. We would draw. In this case, we have 2 options here. We have enough soul to do all our stuff this turn, so it's tempting to not play a Valifor. So we could do something like, but because we're going to have to double Yuika, it probably is still correct to do it. So we'll call Yuika. These will get their 5Ks. We'll call Valifor, get another soul charge, get another card draw from the counterblast, and then we can call our Penelope. This will get 5k, this got 5k. And we're basically right back where we were last turn. We can call this Yasmin if we really want to get a 13k booster for the Vanguard. Otherwise, we can just leave it in hand because it's 15k shield. And we do the same thing every turn. We attack with these, we swing with the Vanguard, we get triple drive, We got a front this time. That's really good. Then we Soul Blast 1. We restand this column. This column's already stood because it got bounced and called again. We do our attacks again. Only this time we use 2. Well, we would have Soul Charge again from the Valifer. We get to use 2. So I guess technically that means we would have Soul Charged this, and we would have hit. We actually would have hit front Perfect Guard crit, I think, off of those drive checks. Pretty good. And then, we're just doing this every turn forever. We're Soul Blasting the 2 cards to get these back to hand, leaving Yuikas in the back row exposed, but probably not as vulnerable as you might think, except when you're playing against, like, Messiah, I guess. And we just can do this forever. Even if we lose the Yuikas this turn, we might be able to draw some kind of boosters. In this case, we're probably going to guard this and draw a card at some point. And look, we found another Yuika. And as long as we have 1, we're pretty much good to go. Especially if we can find a Hewlett with this card. We would have hit a Twin Cast and drawn a card. So we wouldn't have found it, but we can still just leave 1 unit in play, and it's not the end of the world. We can do something like call the Yasmin and call this and call Penelope. It's still a good pattern. Overall, this is going to be basically what we do every turn for the rest of the game. If we don't have a Valifer, we can do stuff like call a Francette or call a Walbrigia just to get additional power. But generally, Valifer is more important because even though it's weaker, it'll generate soul and card draw, which will help us keep the units flowing, especially if we're using Hewlett, which gets rid of itself every turn. So that's the deck. This deck doesn't rely on CB for any of this. We just need to use 1 CB for this effect, and then we are good to go. We can hypothetically never counterblast and draw with Valifer, and it's fine. We'll just plus fewer cards. We'll have to be a little bit more reliant on our drive checks being good. But we'll still be applying a lot of pressure. The numbers are pretty solid. They're not the highest numbers, but they are consistently good numbers every turn, forever, no matter what. And I think that is all you need to succeed in Lyrical Cup, at least. This deck would fare a little bit worse in Standard as a whole, because I think this deck would get bodied by Vavsagra, though it would be able to at least protect its units from the front row retire. It also would probably do okay against any of the Stride decks, because it can choose to go second against the Stride decks and get its full power game plan on turn 3 if they ride up. And if they don't ride up, this deck has good grade 2s to rush with early. We could play like Francette and Valifers early, and then we can use Yuikas to bounce them and protect them. And that way we can basically force the opponent to ride up before us, and then we can use our Yasmins to immediately skip up to grade 4 when they do so, and we get to do basically a Stride turn against their useless grade 3. So that's the deck. I do recommend picking this up. It has some expensive staples. I think Valifers were expensive, Yuikas were expensive, Cycler was expensive, and where is she? Francette, I think, was expensive at one point. I don't know what she is right now, but all these cards are kind of pricey. But on the flip side, these are all generics, which means they're useful in other lyrical decks. You might not play all of these in the same deck in the future, but you could probably guarantee that you're playing 2 of these in the same deck in the future. So these are not bad investments, unless we get hit with major power creep that obsoletes all these cards. In the case of the Energy Cycler, we got the Persona Cyclers, which will probably be usable in more decks than the Energy Cyclers going forward. But the Persona Cyclers themselves are also expensive, so we might prefer the Energy Cyclers regardless. Definitely, I would consider the Persona Cyclers if we switch to grade 3 Kairi as our main attack plan. If we stick with grade 4, Energy Cyclers are just obviously the best. Yuika's great booster, not mandatory, but really solid, and eventually, one day they'll give us a booster better, but they don't look like they're doing it anytime soon because we've seen the Japanese format ahead of time. So these are solid to pick up. Valifers, great generic. Any deck that doesn't really have an outlet for Counterblast or that needs a lot of soul will happily use Valifer. Francette, a good no-cost generic attacker that also bounces units to get you to reuse their effects. Pretty solid. And the Kairi specific support is dirt cheap. This deck is not very expensive to build at all, aside from the expensive generics. If you can find substitutes for these, you can play this deck on a budget. And if you don't care about money, then you're picking up expensive cards and you're getting staples that you can use in the future anyways. So that's it for now. I'll see you next time.